Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lock-Cast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMA LOTN. This week we're going over UFC Fight Island 2, which is headlined by Deiveson Figueiredo and Joseph Benavidez fighting for the flyweight belt for a second time. As obviously you guys know, Deiveson Figueiredo missed weight the first time, won the fight, but doesn't get to go home with the strap. Coupled that in with an inadvertent headbutt, and here we are. They're fighting for it again. So luckily for Joseph Benavidez, he's able to get another shot at that belt. Poor guy, just so many missed opportunities in the past. But here he is to get another chance to redeem himself with this fight. I'm excited for it. You know, Deiveson is always really fun to watch, and hopefully to see him come away with the gold this time around is even more worth it. A couple other intriguing fights throughout the card, but the one, a sleeper fight that I'm really looking forward to is Davi Ramos against Arman Tsarukyan. That should be a great, fun fight. But before we actually get into the breakdowns, let's just go over my last event, which was UFC Fight Island 1, which was headlined by Calvin Kattar versus Diakiese. So you might as well start off with that fight. That was my lock of the night play. I had 4.5 units at minus 269 on Calvin Kattar. That hits for a plus 1.67 units, but I also had 0.5 units on him at minus 125 to win inside the distance. Diakiese's Hawaiian pride and Hawaiian toughness comes through once again, and he's able to see the judges' scorecards, but without, getting absolutely wrecked in that fight. Also had 1 unit at minus 132 on Jimmy Rivera. That cashes for 0.76 units. Very mystified as to how that line was so close. And then missed my dog of the night play on the under 2.5 for Tim Elliott and Ryan Benoit. That missed at plus 140. And then my other dog of the night play, plus 131, 1 unit on Taylor Santos versus Molly McCann. I'm mystified as to why people were so high on Molly McCann, how that line got to where it did. Just as the Deanna Belbito one, ridiculous. Like I'm still truly mystified that so many people were high on both of those women. Molly McCann too, guys. Molly McCann. God, I love you guys. There's a bunch of good friends that I have that make prediction videos that are, touts and handicappers that bet on Molly McCann. Love you guys, but God, that was bad. That was bad. I'm sorry. That was bad. All right, I'm going to shut up about that. So we end the event plus 2.74 units for a 37% return on investment. Solid showing. That's 2 straight winning events now, thank God. And we're looking to hit number 3. And just a reminder, whenever I hit 3 straight events, my 4th and preceding events are paid picks. There are plenty of different ways of getting my picks. But again, for this weekend, the picks are free, so you don't need to worry about that. The best way to get my picks and the cheapest option to get my picks, and not to mention just the picks, the breakdowns too. As you guys notice, once you guys start seeing the videos, I pre-record them, and as soon as I finish recording them, I put it on the Patreon. So check the Patreon out. It's $5 a month, super cheap. You guys get a best bets article, which lets you know which bet to bet on, or sorry, the best bet for every single fight. You get all the picks, like I said, a part of that subscription, and then you get super early access for all the breakdowns for that I release on this podcast. But you guys get them first, and then you guys have direct access to me to ask me whatever the fuck you guys want, whenever the hell you guys want to. All right, that's pretty much it. Let's get into the breakdowns for this card, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Serghei Spivak versus Carlos Felipe. We got minus 175 on Serghei Spivak, plus 155 on the UFC newcomer Carlos Felipe. So let's start off with Carlos Felipe, 8-0. This is the first time he's fighting since 2017. He's had a couple of fights booked. I believe he popped on with USADA. I actually do want to confirm that before I throw out any allegations or anything like that. But that's why I believe he hasn't been, He got suspended for 2 years back in 2017. Now here he is making his UFC debut against Serghei Spivak. There's not much tape on Carlos, which is why it's really hard to really have a feel for this matchup. But the limited footage that is out there, it kind of just insinuates in both fights the guy just likes to throw hammers. Like the guy he's a fighter. You know, well, when you watch his fights, he likes to taunt his opponent a bit, even if they're like stepping backwards at all. Like not like a full out like stick your tongue out and all that type of stuff, but like just come on, where you going? Let's throw down. Where are you going? He seems like that kind of fighter, and when he throws with ill intentions. Like he has a lot of pop on his shots. Technically, he's not the greatest, in terms of the mechanics of his striking, but it's still, at heavyweight, it doesn't really matter. Like, just ask Francis Ngannou. Technically and mechanically, Francis Ngannou isn't the greatest striker, but with God-given power like that, he can turn out anybody's lights. And Carlos Felipe, not saying he has Francis Ngannou level type power, but he does have some power behind his shots that can make it very difficult for a lot of his opponents. Serghei Spivak, on the other hand, I know he has been finished quickly by Walt Harris in the past, but I believe he's somewhat durable. Like, he ate some good shots from Tai Tuivasa, ate some good shots from Tybura, and he was still chugging away. Obviously, got the victory in the Tuivasa fight, lost the Tybura fight just due to, Tybura just being the overall better fighter. Here, I think he'll have more tools in the shed than Carlos Felipe. I think that we'll see him kind of stick around on the feet and then wait for a perfectly timed takedown and try to just ride out on top. My concern here is that Carlos Felipe seems like a very strong individual as well too. He seems like a guy that if you do take him down, he wouldn't have that much trouble getting back to his feet without even using anything like technically correct from a jiu-jitsu standpoint. There's just so many like question marks in this fight. Like we don't know what kind of Carlos Felipe we're gonna get with him being out as long as he has. Spivak is just such a random bag full of tricks in terms of what he's gonna do or how he's gonna look. It's hilarious every time I watch Spivak tape. It's just like it's like an overgrown Draco Malfoy / Dracula wannabe. Just the way he looks, it's hilarious. That hairline is like a solid hairline too. It's probably the most meanest hairline that I've probably ever seen. But getting back to his actual fighting style, that R triangle choke that he landed on Tai Tuivasa. Tuivasa pretty much just put himself in that situation too. Like, he was in a good spot to defend the choke as they were up against the cage. And for some goddamn reason, Tai Tuivasa, moves to his left away from the cage, giving Spivak enough room to get into that half guard position, that side control position to complete that choke. If Tuivasa just kept his right hip up against the cage and just, tried to keep, as least room possible for Serghei Spivak to really sprawl out and get the full torque on that choke, he probably still would have been in that fight, but it seemed like he just legit gave up. Didn't want to tap in front of his home crowd either, which is why he decided to go out too. But it was a solid win for Spivak. But Tai Tuivasa, just not a good fighter in my opinion. Has a ton of good knockout power and is decent on the feet, but that's probably where it stops for him. So with Spivak and Felipe, I just don't know what to expect. I'm thinking that Serghei, again, he's going to play around on the feet a little bit, just enough to get Carlos comfortable on the feet, and then he's going to go for a takedown and try to, either go for a submission or just ride top control and try to suck it out of Felipe, so that the second and third rounds are a little bit easier. He doesn't really have to worry about getting knocked out or anything like that, and he could just ride it out that way. But at minus 175, I'm definitely not willing to risk my money to find out if that's the type of game plan that Spivak intends on going into this fight with. This is a stay away fight totally. Even the under 1.5 or under 2.5, I don't know. Like, we don't know if we're going to get a conservative Spivak who does get the top control and does, try to ride it out that way, or if we get the Spivak that does get top control and is looking for the finish the entire time. Or Carlos Felipe just goes out there and starches him within the first minute. No idea. I need to see Carlos fight maybe 1 or 2 UFC fights before I feel like I can get a proper read on him. And obviously those fights need to be at least longer than a round, longer than 3 or 4 minutes, so we can see what he truly has. But up until then, I'm staying away from betting a fight with Felipe in it. And again, even with somebody as sketchy as Serghei Spivak, there's no need to risk money on this fight. But I'm going to go with Serghei Spivak to win this fight. I'll say by decision. I say that he takes him down every round and just rides top. Maybe lands a bit of a ground and pound finish or or a submission finish, but I'm not confident in it at all. I need more tape on Carlos to really get a good read on him and figure out if he is, if he's beatable. He's 8-0 currently, and two, what exactly are the routes to victory against a guy like him. So, in my opinion, it's the takedown, which we've seen from Spivak before. Crafty takedowns, crafty hip tosses, leg sweeps. He has them in his arsenal, but I don't know if he'll be able to get a thick boy like Carlos down with some of those tricks. So I'll still go with Spivak to win this fight by decision, but not confident in it at all. Davi Ramos versus Arman Tsarukyan. We got -200 on Arman and +185 on Davi Ramos. Let's start off with Ramos here, coming in as the underdog. So these guys were actually scheduled to fight before this whole COVID thing went down. I believe it was for the UFC 249. No, sorry, it was April 11th card, whatever that one was scheduled to be. But that was one of the highlights in terms of one of the fights I was really looking forward to once UFC 250 got canceled, or initially canceled. But yeah, when we thought we were still going to get the next three events, this was the one fight that was really sticking out to me just because of stylistically how these guys clash and how they're how their skills will match up against each other. So like I said, starting off with Davi Ramos, the guy's a high-level jiu-jitsu player, like super, super high level. Mix that in with his strength and his durability. This guy's a problem for a lot of people. We've seen some flashes of brilliance with it, maybe not so much against a guy like John Gunther and Nick Hein, who's a little bit more tested. But Austin Harbert, he was not able to get the finish in that fight. The Makhachev fight, that was his second loss in the UFC. That was a fight that primarily took place on the feet. At least not until the last half of the third round, where Makhachev got him down and pretty much held him up against the cage, or at least pushed his head up against the cage. So Davi wasn't able to really get off any type of offensive jiu-jitsu from there. That's pretty much the only place you can be safe with Davi. He's very good with throwing up arm bars, rolling for heel hooks. Very, very impressive with his jiu-jitsu, which is why that fight more than likely took place on the feet due to Islam not really wanting to put himself into danger, and then Davi not really able to get Islam down. And I think that's going to kind of play similarly in this fight against Arman, because Arman is, I think, a slightly worse version of Islam, and even that, I think he's still above, he'll still be like a top 10 fighter. But the kid's still very young. Arman's only coming in as I believe 23-year-old. Yeah, he's 23, born in 96, which is absolutely mind-blowing. But he did lose to Islam Makhachev in his first UFC fight, and then he comes back and beats Olivier Aubin-Mercier, which, upon rewatching, was a lot closer of a fight than I had remembered. Aubin-Mercier did a good job of staying on the feet, stuffed a ton of takedowns, had a really successful second round, hurting Arman a couple times, and that fight really started to sway me more and more away from wanting to bet Arman in this fight, even at that -200 range. Now, I expect this fight to still play out relatively the same as an Islam fight, as I think that Arman is probably going to try to keep this fight on the feet for the first 2.5-ish rounds, and then really start to implement his grappling at the latter half to really secure the victory. But I think he does have a really good advantage on the feet. Training over at Tiger Muay Thai, spends a lot of time with Piotr Jan as well, who's now the bantamweight champion. He shows good techniques when it comes to the striking realm. Even in his fight against Islam Makhachev, he did have a lot of success with his striking. Again, these guys are two strong grapplers. I expect it to take place on the feet for the majority of it. And with that said, I think that Arman has the advantage on the feet. And Davi Ramos doesn't really throw much volume. He pretty much just looks to take your head off. He doesn't really care if you're going to try to take him down, because he believes that his jiu-jitsu will be good enough to submit you anyway. So that, it's kind of like the Sergio Moraes, the Hani Yahya type of fight, the Damian Maia type of fight, if you want to say that. I think that Davi probably possesses way more power than those guys, which is why he throws with such heat whenever he does. But man, that's only going to get you so far. You got to really be aggressive with your striking, closing the distance, pushing guys up against the cage, and kind of dragging them down from there. But I don't see him having the advantage here in terms of getting Arman down. I think Arman will do a decent job of keeping this fight on the feet. I think Davi has a better chance of getting Arman down than he did Islam. So there is that little bit of hesitancy here in terms of being fully comfortable betting Arman here. I still think that he's going to win. I still think that he'll get the better of the striking exchanges and then pull away with a decision victory later in this fight, which is why, I'm going to take Arman to win this fight by decision, but I'm not 100% sure in terms of wanting to actually bet him. Minus 200 is not that bad of a range for a fighter that has a ton of potential. But again, when you have guys like, this is kind of like the Ben Askren thing, and I'm not comparing Arman to Ben Askren in terms of, the wrestling credentials and overall fighting style. Obviously, Arman has the better striking than Ben Askren, but when you have the two strengths going head-to-head and you need to use your strength against the opponent's strength, I'm not the most... I'm not the most comfortable with those situations. So again, I do expect it to play out on the feet, but I'm not willing to risk my money to find out if that's the type of strategy that Arman's going to go with. But I do think that he will have the advantage on the striking side of things. And then later in the fight with the grappling side of things when Davi is a little bit more gassed. But yeah, I'm going to go with Arman to win this fight by decision. And I think this is a great fight for him, at least in terms of, continuing to grow as a fighter, getting the experience that's required to be a successful UFC contender, and getting Islam Makhachev in your first fight, that's crazy. And the fact that he made it somewhat competitive, a feather in his cap. His stock only rose in that fight, even though it was his first loss in the UFC. Comes back and wins a solid fight over Olivier Aubin-Mercier, and now to get Davi Ramos under your belt as well, that's very impressive. So I like that they're taking the slow and steady approach with Arman because he has a ton of potential. Seems like he could be a very marketable fighter as well once he really starts to get into his own. And he's young. He's 23. There's no rush with this kid. Just keep feeding him these middle tier guys, skilled middle tier guys, so that he can continue to gain the appropriate experience to use in his in his future bouts. But yeah, I like Arman to win this fight. I'm going to say by decision, but it will probably end up being a pass for me, and probably just going to sit back and enjoy it as a fan. Amir Albazi versus Malcolm Gordon. We got a pair of newcomers here. We got minus 165 on Amir and plus 135 on Malcolm Gordon. Let's start off with Amir Albazi, who has a 12-1 record. His only loss coming to former UFC vet Jose Torres in a somewhat closely contested fight. You could say it was 1-1 going into that third round, and then Jose Torres was able to take over with a bit of his striking and a little bit of grappling to really steal it away from Amir. And Amir kind of looked puzzled on the feet when he was fighting Jose Torres, and if you watch the rest of his fights, it kind of makes sense because he's more so of a grappler, grinder, tries to overwhelm you with his wrestling, and he does a decent job of looking for the finish whenever he's on the ground too, whether it's ground and pound, whether it's a choke, whatever it is. He's very good at going for those submissions. The one concern I will say is his competition leading up to the UFC outside of the Jose Torres fight, which is the one that he lost. Jamie Powell seems to be the most decent opponent that he's faced, 6-1. He fought last time around Ryan Curtis, 5-1. But some of these guys that he's going up against have a lack of experience, which is something that Malcolm Gordon has a ton of. 12-3 coming into this fight. Malcolm Gordon is somebody that I'm very familiar with, as I worked a couple shows that he fought on super early on his career. Score Fighting Series 6, I was a part of that way back in 2012. Substance Cage Combat 1, he actually beat a guy that was from the gym that we had. And then obviously he's been fighting a lot in the Ontario regional scene. Racked up some good wins. Chris Khadis was a great win of his. I believe that was that was before Chris Khadis even made it to the UFC. He had losses to Randy Turner and Austin Ryan, who were both, Randy Turner was more so on the tail end of his career, and then started going on a losing streak from that. But he was a huge name within the Ontario scene coming out of Ottawa. And then Austin Ryan was another up-and-coming prospect from the West Coast that he got TKO'd by. Dimitri Wardenberg, that's another guy. Seems to have a salty record, but he's been around the game for a while in this Quebec and Ontario scene. He was 11-7 going into that fight. I don't think Wardenberg's fighting anymore, so he did cap off his career at 13-8. Fought a ton of high level guys, but Wardenberg was one of those like savages on the regional scene that, you know, maybe not have made it to the big stage, but was one of those guys that was, you know, definitely putting a beating on a lot of guys. And he had the size advantage here against Malcolm Gordon, and he also had the striking advantage, which is why he was able to get the finish after, you know, chopping the legs down of Malcolm Gordon. Malcolm is, you know, it's pretty straightforward with him in terms of what he's looking for. He's looking to implement his jiu-jitsu. He tapped out Yanni Sherbatov last time around, who was, again, former tough guy. On the Ultimate Fighter, I believe that was the flyweight season, champion season. And, you know, he managed to tap out Yanni Sherbatov. Very, very good feather in his cap there. The James Mancini win was a big win for him, too, because Mancini is a pretty good wrestler himself. Salty record, again, 5-3, but a guy that is very accredited with his wrestling. Apologies. But, yeah, he did... you know, he wrestled all over the world. He wrestled for some of the Olympics as well, too. I can't remember exactly which one, but he's a super high-level wrestler, and Malcolm Gordon was able to get the submission. So the thing here with this fight is I believe that Albazi is going to be looking to implement his wrestling and try to outpower Malcolm Gordon, but that kind of plays into Gordon's game of trying to implement his jiu-jitsu. I'm not 100% sold on the fact that I think that Gordon will be able to get the submission, but the fact that he'll be able, or he'll at least be in his realm of comfortability being on the ground, that leaves the opening for him to get a submission. You know, he's just recently started training with Bazooka Joe Valtellini, who's another guy from the Toronto area. So he's starting to sharpen up his tools on the feet, as that seems to be where he has the most trouble. Albazi doesn't seem to have the greatest striking, at least from everything that we've seen. He just likes to go for the takedown and pretty much grind out his opponents. I believe that we will see Albazi try to, you know, land some damage on the feet before taking the fight to the ground, as I believe he knows that it will also be very tricky for him to win this fight just from the top position, knowing that Malcolm Gordon is going to be threatening more often than not. You know, I like that Gordon's been training with Valtellini and trying to sharpen up those tools. We'll always have the MMA, you know, Canadian MMA legends and vets like Sam Stell, Chris Hordeski, and Marc Hominick in his corner at all times. He was one of the... you know, started up young with Sean Tompkins, who passed away not recently, but it's been several years now. But he was one of his prodigies before Tompkins passed away. You know, he had a ton of steam coming into his MMA career, and he has just not let up. It's awesome seeing him, you know, pretty much develop from his first ever pro MMA fight, and now, you know, finally making it to the UFC under weird circumstances. Obviously, he came in as a short notice opponent, and now he gets a short notice opponent as well too. So, you know, both guys coming in on short notice. I'm gonna side with Gordon here, and I'm trying to keep bias out of it, but I wasn't really impressed with what I saw on the feet for Albazi, and I do think that he's going to have to lean on his wrestling here to get the victory, but again, that plays into Gordon's game. So I like Gordon to pull off a submission here. I could see him reversing and sweeping Albazi, probably getting a second or third round choke. But another thing might be to look for here would be the fight doesn't go to decision, which I believe is -105. So that yeah, -105. It'll probably be lined at 2.5, so maybe the under would be, you know, small plus money. That might be something I'm looking at. But you guys already know how I feel about betting on newcomers. And even though I'm familiar with Malcolm Gordon, you know, just betting on newcomers, even if they're fighting each other, has burned me too much in the past. I might stay away from this fight, but the under is probably something to look at if you're looking at betting this fight. But in terms of making a pick, I'll go with Malcolm Gordon to win this fight by third round submission. Brett Johns versus Montel Jackson. We got -220 on Jackson, +180 on the Pikey. Let's start off with Montel Jackson, who seems to be a very promising prospect. He's 9-1. His only loss or professional loss came to Ricky Simone in his UFC debut. And after that, he strung together 3 straight victories, a dart stroke over Brian Kelleher, and then 2 decision victories over Andre Sukumtat and Felipe Khadis, who, if you guys remember that fight, he showed a really good chin on himself, and Kolaris took a huge beating, and it seemed like Montel Jackson kind of gassed himself out in those first 2 rounds, trying to put Kolaris away. That seemingly gave me a little bit of pause in terms of thinking that Montel Jackson had a trash gas tank. But if you really pay attention to those first 2 rounds, man, he put a lot into those shots to try and put Kolaris away, and he just was not, successful in doing so. Between rounds 2 and 3, he looked like he was going to cough up a lung or something. Like he looked so gassed. He was resting his head up against the fence. It looked really bad. And his corner could tell too. Like, we just need 5 more minutes, and you got this in the bag. And he did a decent job of going out there and performing well in that 3rd round, even though he was as tired as he was. The guy, there's no doubt about it. It looks like he has a ton of potential. He has a ton of skill. Good wrestler, has a crazy frame for this division. His hands, as they say, are like bigger than Francis Ngannou's, which is crazy for a 135er. The guy's grip strength is ridiculous too. His strength alone is ridiculous as well. His hands are slowly starting to come together as well. We can obviously tell that is his, his wrestling is his forte, and his striking is kind of just stringing on behind that. And I feel like it's going to slowly get better on a fight-by-fight basis. In this fight against Brett Johns, though, Brett Johns is a scrappy fighter, a grinder, kind of like a Jack Shore type fighter, where he's always just going for the takedown, looking to out-control you, out-grapple you, grind you down, and then eventually submit you or break you later on in the fight. And he did that for a really long time. He went 15-0 before running into Aljamain Sterling, who kind of has a similar build to Montel Jackson, but I'd say he's the better jiu-jitsu player. I'd say Aljo's the slightly better striker, but he's not really a technically sound striker. He's more of a flash. He's a lot of kicks and all that. Jackson throws kicks, but just not as much as Aljamain Sterling. I'd say Jackson's hands are slightly better than Sterling. And then after that, Brett Johns went on to lose to Pedro Munoz in a fight where Munoz just kicked Johns' legs off. It was crazy. And then after that, he comes back, gets a very emotional victory over Tony Gravely last time around. We saw him kind of breaking up afterwards because it was his first ever loss that he incurred to Aljamain Sterling. Then he lost another fight, so back-to-back losses, and then finally snapping out of that winless streak. I'm sure it was very emotional for him, and it was a very big thing for him to accomplish, especially getting a finish as well. That must have been a big feather in his cap as well. So now in he comes against another highly touted prospect in Montel Jackson, but he'll probably be out-credentialed in terms of the grappling and the wrestling here, but his heart and his cardio may be the difference maker here. And throughout the week, you can definitely see the love that Brett Johns is getting, because the odds initially opened at -295 for Montel Jackson, got all the way to -190, and now he's back down to roughly around the -210, -220 range. But a lot of people are starting to recognize that Brett Johns probably has all the tools that are required to beat a guy like Montel Jackson. If we look at that fight with Montel Jackson and Ricky Simón, his only loss, you notice that Ricky Simón is just the far more active guy, the stronger guy too, which probably played a part in that. I'd say, Ricky Simón is one of the stronger grapplers out there, but he just absolutely outpowered Montel Jackson in that fight. Was always a step ahead of him. Jackson landed a couple good shots on him too, but nothing too crazy. And Ricky Simón was able to come out with the victory. I don't think that Brett Johns has the hands that Ricky Simón has. I obviously think that Jackson will have the better hands here, but it's going to come down to the pace and the pressure that Brett Johns is going to continuously put on Montel Jackson. And last time around, we did see when the pace did start to pick up, Montel Jackson started to slow a bit in that 3rd round. And if Brett Johns is in your face that entire 15 minutes, you got to assume that 3rd round is going to look a little shady for Montel Jackson. So going into this fight, going into researching this fight, I really thought I was going to come out on the other end wanting to bet Montel Jackson, but that small Brett Johns pretty much has everything that I want in a fighter that I'm looking to bet, which is solid wrestling-ish, a good grinding style, and solid cardio. And those are the things that are keeping me away from Montel Jackson and potentially making a small play on Brett Johns. I can't believe I actually said those words, but he has all the traits that you need. I'm kind of bummed that I didn't bet him in the Gravely fight, even though that was quite closely contested. But I think Brett Johns will be able to survive, a round and a half with Montel Jackson while pushing the pressure, while pushing the pacing, making this a very tiring fight. And I think that at the end of the day, that's going to be the difference maker. It's just his grittiness and his willingness to continue to push the pressure. He's not going to let Montel Jackson really breathe, and I think that's where Jackson will start to run into some trouble. I think with the line slowly trending back towards Montel Jackson, I'll probably wait for that plus 200 on Brett Johns and probably play like 0.5 to 0.75 units on him, as I think that he has a solid chance of winning this fight with just his, again, grit, cardio, and his pace and pressure. So, I can't believe I'm saying that because I am a high on Montel Jackson, but I think that Johns has a good chance of squeaking out 2 or 3 rounds, strictly being the more aggressive and the guy with the better cardio. So I'll go with Brett Johns to win by decision, and it's possibly going to be a bet too. So Brett Johns via decision. Joe Duffy versus Joel Alvarez. We got minus 350 for Duffy and plus 290 for Joel. Let's start off with the Spanish El Fenomeno. Joel Alvarez, 16-2, coming off a victory over Danilo Belluardo, where he got a victory via ground and pound. That was a fight where we saw him get taken down a couple times. He used his striking very, decently until Danilo was able to get him down. He got him down in the first round. Alvarez was able to threaten a couple times with the submission, wasn't able to lock anything up. And then in the second round, once again, Danilo got him down with relative ease, I must say. And then got swept Joel went out there and actually just got a quick finish once he got that reversal. You could make a slight argument that it was a little bit of a quick stoppage. Like, Danilo was still all there. But yeah, he was eating a lot of shots without really intelligently defending himself. So I can absolutely understand the stoppage there. But in the Demirez Magula fight, he got absolutely outclassed. Demir is one of the top guys in the UFC, and it's unfortunate that we don't get to see him even more often because the guy is super talented. I think he's going to be a top 5 guy, so a loss to Demir is not the worst thing in the world for Joel either. Here, though, with Joe Duffy, Duffy's a great boxer. He stepped away from MMA for a while to go do boxing. Then he came back to MMA, came into the UFC, strung together a couple good wins, and then he ran into Dustin Poirier, who was able to get the better of him. And then after that, strung together 2 wins, lost to James Vick, took off a little bit of time, lost to Marc Diakiese, and now again he's coming back after a year and 4 months off due to a rib injury. He said it was really bugging him during the last 2 fights, especially the Marc Diakiese fight. I try not to read too much into that because pretty much every fighter comes into fights with injuries. So, Duffy can say what he wants about him being injured, but now is his time to go out there and really prove it. After reviewing the tape on both of these guys, I'm kind of I'm picking Joe Duffy to win by all means. My only concern here is the fact that the line is a little bit too wide. Minus 350 is a little bit crazy. If he is in the minus 200, minus 250 range, I would probably have absolutely no qualms about pulling a trigger here on Joe Duffy because I believe, and he should as well too, especially with him training over at TriStar. Even during this whole pandemic thing, he was over at TriStar training with Faraz and those guys. And you got to believe that the game plan here has got to be to go out there and take down Joel Alvarez and implement his jiu-jitsu, especially considering how easy it seems to take down. It is to take down Joel Alvarez. The guy, his takedown defense is pretty much non-existent. Duffy has fought James Vick, who is roughly the same size as Joel Alvarez in terms of being a very tall, I believe this fight's at lightweight. I just want to confirm that, just being at lightweight, very, very tall frame, but it's nothing that Joe Duffy hasn't seen before. And we saw Joe Duffy start to come on a little bit in that James Vick fight before he got caught with that slick uppercut from James Vick, and then, was put out. Again, another roughly quick stoppage. Like, Duffy was pretty much back to his feet. He wasn't really protesting the loss. He was obviously hurt, but man, like, he had 1 second to survive before going into that third round, and who knows how that third round would have played out. But he uses leg kicks very well. His boxing is just very, very underrated, and I think a lot of people are just writing off Joe Duffy now, just due to he hasn't won a fight since Hazel Madadi back in March of 2017, but that's just due to his inactivity. Unfortunate losses to James Vick and Marc Diakiese, who looks like a new fighter now too. But I think this is an easy fight for him. My only concern here is playing him at minus 350 and above is just not something that I want to do. I prefer that minus 250 range. I have been seeing a little bit of love for Joel Alvarez out there, so I wouldn't be surprised to see this line come down a little bit. But I don't know how long I will wait for it. Maybe until like a couple hours before the event time, I'll see where he's at. But I think Joe Duffy gets the better on the feet. Very slick boxing. Again, huge background in it. I think as an actual fighter too, let me get what his box record is. Shout out to BoxRec, pretty much the tapology of the boxing world. Yeah, he's 7-0, 2 KOs. His last one was when was that? 2013 was the last time he fought in boxing. But yeah, I just think that his path to victory is going to be getting the takedown as soon as possible and start to work his jiu-jitsu, which he has caught numerous people in the past with before. He has a ton of submission victories on his record, especially one to Mr. Conor McGregor back in November of 2010. But yeah, I like Joe Duffy here. I think he is the better fighter, and if he truly is at 100%, doesn't have any nagging rib injury or anything, looming over him. Listening to his interviews as well too, he seems very motivated. He knows that's a shit streak that he's been on. He's not fighting to his standard, as he calls it. But yeah, I think Joe Duffy goes out there, puts on a statement, gets Joel Alvarez down, and probably gets the submission, probably first or second round. So passing on to him at the minus 350 range, not even entertaining Joel Alvarez at that plus 280, plus 290 range. I think Joe Duffy gets this one done. But yeah, I gotta, you know what? What's the Joe Duffy inside the distance? Let's take a peek at that. The under 2.5 is plus 145. Joe Duffy by submission is plus 405. Joe Duffy by TKO is plus 375. And Joe Duffy inside the distance is plus 175. So plus 175 is not bad, considering I believe that he will submit him. But again, even if he gets like the back or something and decides to go with the ground and pound, I would rather go with the inside the distance than actually picking the Duffy submission prop. I'd probably consider the Duffy inside the distance plus 175. That's not a bad number at all. But yeah, I'll take Duffy to win this fight by first round submission, possible TKO, ground and pound. But the takedown defense of Joel Alvarez is very concerning, especially if you're going to back Alvarez here. But I'm going with Duffy by first round submission. Grant Dawson versus Nad Narimani. We got minus 230 on Grant Dawson, plus 190 on Nad Narimani. Let's start off with Narimani. He's coming off a loss to Mike Grundy earlier last year, and it's been quite a long time since we've seen him in the cage. It's coming up on a year and 4 months now since we last saw him in the cage. He was scheduled to fight Nick Lentz back in January, but had to pull out due to an injury. Here he is against another wrestler and grappler himself in Grant Dawson. And the intriguing part of this fight is going to be to see who is able to actually implement the wrestling effectively, or if this fight is mainly going to be a striking battle. I feel like Grant Dawson will have the slight cardio edge, but I think both guys have shown in the past that, if they're putting on their grueling grappling pace, that they will slow down a little bit in the third. So I expect both of them to have a bit of a pace in this fight. But what's scaring me away from Grant Dawson here is I believe that it will be a striking battle. And if it ends up being a striking battle, it could be a close fight. And we've seen some very, very sketchy judging since this whole COVID thing began. And, maybe it's the lack of crowd, whatever the hell it is. Judges are starting to get some of these fights wrong. And when you're looking at a fight like this, you got to believe that it's going to be closely contested. And even if it gets to the grappling positions, I think that Grant Dawson has the better jiu-jitsu, so he might be able to control those positions a little bit better. But man, Narimani looks very, very strong. He could easily, his strength could come into play here and make it difficult for Grant Dawson to really get his jiu-jitsu going. But, it'll be the second and third rounds where things really start to get interesting. But going into this fight, I wanted to come out with a solid reasoning as to why I should bet Grant Dawson, but I'm still not sold on Dawson, especially in this matchup. If he was going up against a striker, then maybe I'd be a little bit more willing. But Narimani, he has shown poor takedown defense in the past, so I believe Dawson will be able to get him down, but I could see this absolutely playing out on the feet too. I'm going to still side with Grant Dawson. I think he will get the better of the exchanges, whether it's striking. I think he'll have the slightly higher output as well. And then again, as much as I think that this fight will mainly play out in a striking realm, if it does hit the ground and does start to get into the grappling realm, I believe in Grant Dawson's jiu-jitsu a little bit more than I do in the wrestling and the strength of Narimani. And he has been training at Team Alpha Male. I'm not 100% sure if that's where he still finds himself even during this COVID thing. Let's just take a quick look over at it. It has over at his Instagram to see where he's been training at. But yeah, most of his training footage has been coming from it's definitely not Team Alpha. He's training with a bunch of guys over in England, it seems. Robbins, I'm not 100% sure where that is. I believe that is England, but regardless, Team Alpha Male training would have been very, very helpful for him, considering that Grant Dawson likes to really go for submissions, especially the guillotine and Darce chokes. I'm gonna side with Grant Dawson here. I'm gonna say him to win actually by decision as well too. I could see a late finish for him potentially, maybe some sort of choke, but I do like Grant Dawson in this spot. I just think he's a little bit too big of a favorite for a fight that could potentially be played out a little bit closer, and the judges might get involved, which makes things a little bit trickier. So I'll go with Grant Dawson to win by decision, but in terms of a bet, maybe in a parlay, but probably not as a straight bet. So I'm going with Grant Dawson here to win by decision. Khadis Ibragimov versus Roman Dolidze. I might be butchering how to say his last name. I wish I actually got that information first before I started recording this. But regardless, we'll go with Roman and Khadis. We got minus 147 or minus 150 on Roman and plus 140 on Khadis. The under 2.5 is currently around minus 155, which is what I believe is the rightful play here if you were to make a play on this fight. But either way, it's a pass. Both guys are, scrappers. They're guys that want to go out there and bang. These are guys that actually enjoy fighting, like they really want to fight. I think more so Roman than Khadis. If you watch Roman's fight, this guy just loves to go in there and bang. He doesn't really have anything outside of like a jab and an overhand right. He does like to throw an uppercut every now and then, but more often than not, this guy just likes to go in there and bang and try to get a knockout as soon as possible. There's not really any takedowns or anything in his game. The only diversity I've seen in his game is that, he's pushed guys up against the cage and kind of tried to knee them and suck a little bit of energy out of them. But outside of that, like, he likes to stand in the middle of the cage, likes to jab his opponent and wait for his opportunities to go in and then just throw a bunch of heavy shots. Luckily for him, he's going up against a guy that kind of fights similarly. Like, if you remember Khadis's fight with Ed Herman, he tried to pretty much clinch fuck him against the cage for the first little bit, and then after that, they were just throwing bombs in the middle, unless Ed Herman was the one that started to initiate the clinch games. There's no takedowns in either of these guys. I'm not sure if either of them are even looking for it. I think Roman, just based on what you see in the cage, you can tell the type of fighter that he is and the kind of fighter that he wants to be known as. And with that said, like, it's more than it's more than likely that he wants to go in there, make a name for himself right off the bat by just taking Khadis's head off. So I could definitely see a possibility as to why the under 2.5 should be something that should be played. With that said, though, both guys are somewhat durable. Like, they can eat some shots, and then their activity kind of wanes every now and then. So there might be, you know, dead spots every now and then where they're just circling, looking at each other, throwing jabs here and there. But they're not really the type of guys to just go complete berserker mode and try to take your head off. They're slightly calculated, but calculated is a little bit of a term overused in this, or with a little bit too much meaning in this matchup. They look for their spots, they try to find it, and they try to take their opponent's head off. I have absolutely no play on this fight. There's no reason to. This should be a little bit of a shit show of a fight, so you might as well just sit back, you know, crack a beer and just watch this fight as a fan. But if you guys are obviously coming to this breakdown to see which side I'm actually leaning towards, I'd have to go with Roman a little bit. I think that he has slightly more. He'll have the slightly better gas tank, and that's even just saying a little bit too much. Slightly more power as well too. You know, and then just his aggressiveness and ferocity within the cage, I think it would be able to intimidate a guy like Khadis, especially after spending at least 5 minutes in the cage with him. So I'm going to side with Roman here. You guys know me. I don't like playing or betting on guys making their UFC debuts. But even if this was a second or third fight in the UFC, I'd probably pass on it. I need to see a little bit more diversity from his game compared to just jabbing, and then I'm going to throw this overhand right and hope that it knocks you out. I believe it was his last fight against Michal. Where was that? Michal Pasternak. That was about 2 years ago. That was his last fight, just under 2 years ago. He put him out with a beautiful spinning back fist. Like, he threw a front kick and then just spun into a spinning back fist, and it just absolutely crumpled Michal there. And he followed that up with some aggressive ground and pound. Very impressive. But again, he's just looking for that one shot to put you out. And if he doesn't find it, which doesn't seem to have happened at all in his career, he's been outside of the first round 2 times in 6 fights. So that's something. Like, you got to look at how the UFC has looked to match him up ever since they signed him back in 2019, I believe it was. Scheduled to fight Gadzhimurad Antigulov. That's a guy that has shit cardio, so they're probably hoping that he survived that first round, then would be able to knock out Antigulov after that if Antigulov wasn't able to get the finish in the first round. Vinicius Moreira, another guy, you know, shit gas tank, really good jiu-jitsu. If he's not able to get the fight to the ground, Dolidze would probably be able to knock his head off. And now this fight against Khadis Ibragimov, which should bring a little bit more fireworks, since Ibragimov would seem to be a little bit more inviting of the striking game. But yeah, I'm going to side with Roman here to win this by second round KO, maybe even first round KO. He wants to put on a show. He wants people to remember him, and especially in a venue like the Fight Island venue that they got going on, he gets like direct access to Dana White. So I'm sure he wants to make a little bit of a name for himself. And yeah, Khadis is just not the greatest fighter out there either. So yeah, I'll go with Roman to win by second round KO, but just pass on this fight. This could absolutely just turn into these guys staring at each other for 3 rounds and throwing pot shots every now and then. And then when they do throw big, they just miss, and you know, they just don't have the cardio or exertion levels to be able to actually follow up on those big shots. So I'll go with Roman, second round KO, but yeah, this could be a shit show of a fight too. Askar Askarov versus Alexandre Pantoja. We got minus 185 on Pantoja, plus 170 on Askar Askarov. Let's start off with Pantoja. He's coming off a impressive victory over Machinel last time around, where he dropped him with a beautiful overhand right. Pretty much face-planted Machinel, who on himself was on a pretty impressive streak up until he ran into Pantoja. And now Pantoja has pretty much gained his momentum. Before that, Pantoja actually lost to Deiveson Figueiredo, who, as we know, is main eventing this card, fighting for the flyweight belt. So to have a loss to a guy that's actually fighting for the belt, or, you know, is probably the uncrowned champ, even though he missed weight the first time they fought, or the first time Figueiredo fought for a belt. It's nothing to really worry too much about. Before that, he was on a 3-fight winning streak over Brandon Moreno, Lucas Sasaki, and Wilson Hayes. All very impressive performances, 2 of those being finishes, and now here he is once again getting a finish over Matt Schnell in the first round. This fight against Askarov is going to be a tough one, and I believe that the line should have been slightly closer. Askarov has a bunch of experience overseas. Obviously, he's in the UFC now. He's had 2 fights in the UFC. He got a gift of a split draw against Brandon Moreno. That was a fight where I had Askarov as a lock of the night play. I was so confident in him. I've never really been a Brandon Moreno believer, but that fight definitely made me a little bit more of a believer of him. I thought Askarov was going to be able to go in there and actually just light up Brandon Moreno, get the better of the grappling exchanges, the striking, everything. And Moreno showed the fuck up and pretty much gave Askarov a run for his money for the entire 15 minutes. Even with money on Askarov, I believe that Brandon Moreno won that fight. So, in my mind, Askarov is currently 11-1. Let's take that fight out of the equation. He's coming off a victory over Tim Elliott at UFC 246 this past January. And that was a fight where Tim Elliott just had the stupidest game plan possible. That third round he absolutely gave away, just walking forward, hands down, mocking and enticing Askarov to hit him. But Elliott was throwing nothing in return. How the fuck do you expect to win a fight if you're, telling your opponent to hit you, he hits you, and then you don't even bother countering or doing anything in return? So that was a bit of a gift of a fight for Askarov as well, in my opinion. But this is a fight where he's going to get a legitimate test against Alexandre Pantoja, who's probably top 5 in the division. Winner of this fight possibly gets a title shot too. That's something you got to think about with the repercussions of the fallout of this fight. I think that Pantoja has a slightly better stand-up. I think he has the better jiu-jitsu as well. Askarov has been... it's interesting that he's the underdog in this fight, or as big of an underdog as he is, because I think he can make it competitive. His striking is not too far behind Pantoja. I believe he might have the slight cardio advantage too. This guy's gone 5 rounds a couple times. Obviously, this is only a 3-round fight, but the pace that he'd be able to push might be able to maybe push Pantoja to the brink of his cardio as well too. It's hard for me to really get a read on this fight, man. Like I'm picking Pantoja to win, but it's just such a tough fight to pick. I'm not sure what kind of Pantoja we're going to get. I believe that he'll be the better striker, but I don't think it's a wide margin that he's the better striker. And then even if this fight gets to the ground, Askarov has shown a little bit of flaws, especially in his Tim Elliott and Brandon Moreno fights when it comes to the ground. So maybe that's where Pantoja can really take advantage, but he can really only take advantage when he's the one in the top position. If he's not able to secure that top position, then it gets a little bit dicey. Askarov does a good job of getting out of those bad positions, which is why he's undefeated at this point. So it's going to be, Pantoja is going to really have to work to keep Askarov on his back. And I think that's where Pantoja would be most successful, is if he got this fight to the ground. And, Pantoja doesn't seem to be the hardest to take down. Elliott got him down with some beautiful hip tosses. And, he wasn't able to capitalize because I don't think Tim Elliott has the top game that Pantoja has. So if Pantoja is able to get this fight to the ground with, a hip toss or a leg sweep or a double leg, whatever it may be, I believe we'll see him to be a little bit more successful than Tim Elliott. Again, this fight's going to be a pass for me. The line is a little bit too wide. If you gave me Pantoja around -130 or so, I'd be a little bit more intrigued. But I'm not even intrigued by the plus money or the sizable plus money that we're getting on Askarov here. I do like Pantoja. I think he'll win this fight by decision by just grinding this out, getting the better of the striking exchanges, and then just being a step ahead with the grappling. But this is a tough test for both guys. I want no part of this in terms of money-wise. I don't want to stake on either side, but I do like Pantoja. I'm going to take him to win this fight by decision, and he's probably going to be next in line. So whether it's Davison or Joy B, they better watch out because Pantoja is definitely on the way. And even though he lost to Davison, like I said earlier, I could see him making improvements and him having a better performance this time around, or the second time around against Davison if it ends up being him. But we're talking about this fight. I'm going with Pantoja to win by decision, but wouldn't be surprised if we see Askarov pull off the upset. Ariane Lipski versus Luana Carolina. We got minus 120 on Lipski, plus 100 on Carolina. There seems to be a little bit of action coming in on Luana, hence why this line is starting to close. I believe that Lipski opened around minus 120, got up to minus 110, down to minus 120 now. I actually just placed a bet on Lipski at minus 112 on Pinnacle because I was beyond surprised that we got that price tag for this fight. So let's start off with Luana Carolina first and foremost. She's 6-1. She's coming off a victory over Priscilla Cachoeira. Her and Lipski were scheduled to fight on numerous occasions, and now they're finally getting it done on Fight Island. We've seen Luana Carolina obviously once in the UFC, like I said, against Priscilla Cachoeira. And for those of you familiar with Cachoeira, you guys know what her kind of fighting style is. It's just, what her nickname is, the Zombie Girl. So you guys can probably figure out what kind of game plan Priscilla normally has, which is just march forward, swing bombs, hope to land one of those A-bombs, and really put their opponent out, just like she did with Shanna Dobson last time around. She wasn't able to do that against Luana, and Luana did a decent job in terms of, consistently moving, landing shots from distance, landing good head kicks as well too, which Priscilla pretty much just ate like lunch. Luana, she shows decent aggressiveness on the feet with her Muay Thai as well. She shows some competency on the ground as well too whenever the fight was there. She was locking up triangles, going for arm bars, but it didn't seem like anything that had much on it, which is why she wasn't able to get the finishes in those fights. However, she seems to do her best work on the feet, but even her best work, though, it doesn't seem that polished. Like, it doesn't seem anything that's too, technical. It's more so to throw it out there, and she could absolutely outvolume her opponent, and she could absolutely beat her opponent up, just like she did against Priscilla Cachoeira. Cachoeira, again, just zombie-like, moving forward, pretty much being a moving punching bag, and Luana did a good job of continuously moving, evading the big shots, and landing her own shots. Cachoeira obviously still landed on her, which is why we still saw some damage on Carolina's face, which is a little bit of an attribution to the progression that Luana still needs to make. She does do some defensively things kind of a little bit bad. She holds her chin a little bit too high, especially for being a tall fighter. That doesn't really help. And we'll definitely see the difference in terms of technical abilities here against Ariane Lipski. Lipski, on the other hand, she's very polished. You can see it with her combinations, the way she throws them. She's very calculated about how she's throwing her combinations. Her downfall in the UFC, at least, has been when it comes to the grappling game, and when opponents decide to clinch her up against the cage and start to take her down and get her into thinking that it's going to be a striking battle and then taking it into a grappling realm. It's hard for me to see that Luana going that way. I'd be surprised to see Luana actually go out for a takedown or anything like that. I think she's going to try to keep this on the feet and, believe that she'll be able to outstrike Lipski. In my opinion, she's going to be in for a rude awakening. Great leg kicks from Lipski. She holds distance kind of well. Her punches are just so much more well-rounded and more technical than Luana that it's just surprising to me that the odds are as close as they are. I like Lipski here, hence why I made the 1.2 unit bet on her at minus 112 odds. I thought the odds should be, minus 160, minus 175 for Lipski, just due to talent alone and skill alone. Again, nothing has really shown me in the past that Carolina wants to, initiate grappling exchanges and try to beat her opponents that way. She's always just, trying to strike, trying to outpoint her opponents, but when she starts eating those leg kicks and those punches from Lipski, she's gonna feel it. And I think that she's just not she's just not refined enough in terms of securing good enough takedowns to get Lipski to the ground to really turn the tide back her way. So I like Lipski to pretty much win this fight on the feet. It's going to be hard for me to see a way that Luana goes out there and strikes her or outstrikes her. It's hard for me to see Luana even getting a KO, so I don't even think that she's going to be able to land any type of Hail Mary, strike that will allow her to get the KO here. But yeah, I like Lipski to win this fight enough to bet on her. Going into studying this fight, I thought I'd come out like, okay, I'm just going to stay away from this fight because there's probably a split decision written all over it. But once you really look at the technical abilities of both women, Lipski is much, much more refined, and she'll have a ton more success, in my opinion, as long as we don't see Luana go out there and turn into some sort of wrestler, which I don't think we will. So I'm going to go with Lipski to win this fight by decision. I wouldn't be surprised if she does get a finish in the third round or so, after she just pounced on Carolina for that long. But yeah, I like Lipski to win this fight by decision. Marc Diakiese versus Rafael Fiziev. We got -160 on Diakiese, +140 on Fiziev. Let's start off with Diakiese, who seems to have a little bit of a career resurgence. He came into the UFC highly touted, and then he went on a 3-fight losing streak against decent guys, Jakar Close, Dan Hooker, who just recently main evented against Dustin Poirier, and then Nasrat Haqparast, who himself has started to come upon tough times. But since then, he's strung together 2 victories over Joe Duffy and Lando Venata in fights where he showed a little bit of a different game plan. In his pre those fights, before those fights, he would pretty much just show like a Muay Thai type of game plan, mainly using his hands. He was always the quicker puncher, faster striker, decent leg kicks, but more so his hands were what he was using the most. But since the Nasrat Haqparast fight, the Joe Duffy fight, and the Lando Venata fight, you see that he starts to emphasize the calf kicks a little bit more. And we saw a perfect example of that in the Joe Duffy fight, where it was just calf kick after calf kick, and then just hide it, calf kick. And both Duffy and Venata were not able to find or to figure out the best way to defend against those. And they were pretty much rendered defenseless after that first round. And even though Diakiese wasn't able to get the finishes in those fights, he really, really heavily damaged those guys and put on a spectacular performance. Because again, those leg kicks really open up, those calf kicks really open up a lot for the rest of the game plan of anybody, pretty much. I'm surprised that more fighters are not taking that approach. There are the fighters that are, like the Chris Gutierrez, who most recently got rid of Vince Morales, where he pretty much stopped him via calf kicks. And I believe there was another one the event after. Can't recall off the top of my head, but if you really focus on those calf kicks and you can hide them well, they could be very, very beneficial for you. In this fight against Rafael Fiziev, though, I think it's going to be a little bit tougher for Diakiese to get those calf kicks going. Fiziev is a top striker. He's a Muay Thai master, if you want to call it that. I believe he's one of the head coaches or one of the coaches over at Tiger Muay Thai, which has for years now been one of the top Muay Thai schools in the world. So you gotta believe that he sees those calf kicks and he probably has something up his sleeve to combat those. His only loss has been to Magomed Mustafayev, which was this crazy spinning back kick to the head, which pretty much still hit the guard of Fiziev, but was still able enough to generate enough velocity to put Fiziev on his butt, and then Mustafayev followed up with a bunch of punches to finish off that fight. But if Diakiese wants to center his game plan around calf kicks, I think it's going to not work out as well as it has in his last 2 fights. I think Fiziev will counter it well. I think he'll be ready for those calf kicks to check them. I think he has fast hands. He's very explosive himself. I think Diakiese would have to go the route of like going into his wrestling. We saw Fiziev pull out his wrestling against Alex White last time around. Maybe he pulls out the wrestling too. I think this fight really comes down to which fighter decides to initiate the grappling, because either guy doesn't really have a crazy jiu-jitsu game or any game off their back really, which allows for the person that is on top to be a little bit more successful. And this is another fight where, going into it, I'm like, all right, Diakiese, from what I remember and what he's shown as of late, he's probably going to be a lock of the night play. But once you get into the tape and you see what Fiziev's all about, you kind of back off that statement a little bit, just as I have. So this fight is going to be a stay away fight for me. It's almost a dog or pass situation at this point. Again, plus 140-ish on Fiziev is not too bad for a guy who, strike for strike could probably be up there with Diakiese. I'm very intrigued to know what kind of game plan he's going to be coming in with, or both guys. Which one is going to be, okay, let's dilly-dally with the striking for a little bit, and then let's get that takedown going. I don't know which one it's going to be first, but again, I think that Fiziev is just right up there with Diakiese in terms of their striking. So you got to go if they're, if the striking is a wash, the wrestling is a little bit of a wash. Neither guy is a high-level jiu-jitsu practitioner either. Dog or pass, in my opinion. So I'll go with Fiziev here, and I'm kind of... It kind of hurts me to say that because I know that Diakiese is one of my guys. Newsom's probably like one of his best buddies, at least, that are a fighter and is managed by that team too. But man, Fiziev is a beast, and this is a tough fight. I believe he was initially scheduled to fight, or Diakiese was initially scheduled to fight Alain Patrick before that fight got scrapped within a couple days of being announced. And I thought that was a much better matchup for Diakiese in terms of being able to initiate his calf kicks. But this one's a little bit tougher for him to do that, in my opinion. I think Fiziev's going to read that, and he's going to be able to counter properly and really make it a difficult time for Diakiese. And again, whoever initiates the grappling first will probably come out on top here. So I'm going to go with Fiziev to win this fight by decision. But yeah, it should be a fun fight while it lasts. As long as they're willing to go out there and gunsling, it should be a fun fight up until the point that one of them decides that, okay, I need to win this fight. Let's get the grappling aspect of this going on. So I'll go with Fiziev to win by decision. I think he'll be the stronger one too. But yeah, I'll go with Fiziev. Probably won't be a bet, but I'm taking Fiziev to win by decision. Jack Hermansson versus Kelvin Gastelum. We got minus 110 on Jack Hermansson, plus 100 on Kelvin Gastelum. Very, very closely lined fight. It has pretty much stayed at a pick'em this entire time. I just want to see what 5 dimes. Yeah, 5 dimes opened Jack Hermansson at minus 120. Got all the way up to plus 125, and now he's back to minus 110, which kind of makes sense. Very, very closely lined fight. Let's start off with Jack Hermansson, who's coming off a loss to Jared Cannonier last time around. It was in that Scandinavian region. I believe it was one of the first events they had out there, so they were just very happy to have Jack Hermansson come out there and headline for them, especially with the 4-fight winning streak that he was riding over Thales Leites, Gerald Meerschaert, David Branch, and then Jacare Souza, which was one of his biggest wins of his career, I should say. And then he comes in against Jared Cannonier and gets starched in the second round. That first round, that was a very interesting round because he shot for a ton of takedowns and was not successful on any of them. I believe he did get Cannonier down very shortly. Cannonier just got back to his feet pretty easily. But yeah, that just speaks to the strength of Cannonier as well, because it didn't even seem like he put much technique into the get-up. It was more so just strength-based, so he was able to get up pretty easily. But Jack, just from watching his other fights, you can tell that he's very, very strong. He has a relentless wrestling, strategy pretty much in all of his fights. Tries to outpower his opponents, and his weird, awkward size as well too kind of helps with that. And when we talk about size, he's going to have a significant size advantage here against a shorter Kelvin Gastelum. So we're talking about a 61 or 6 foot 61 inch, 6'1" Jack Hermansson with a 77.5 inch reach compared to a Kelvin Gastelum, who I believe, 5'9" with the 71.5 inch reach. So he's going to have to deal with a lot of that size disadvantage, obviously, but that's not something that Kelvin Gastelum isn't used to. Last time around, he lost a split decision to Darren Till. Very kind of an anticlimactic fight, considering what the expectations were going into that. Darren Till played it very, very safe, kept his range, was able to shrug off any type of takedown attempt. The clinch game was pretty quick in terms of, getting in and out of it. But for the most part, Darren Till did a good job of moving around, landing the 1-2 shots that he needed to, and then getting out of the way of any of the big shots of Kelvin Gastelum. I don't expect that same type of fight to play out here against Jack Hermansson. I think Hermansson's just going to go in right from the get-go, try to get the takedowns, and Gastelum has decent grappling and decent takedown defense, but when you're talking about facing a guy like Jack Hermansson, who's so big, probably going to be way stronger than him too, I find it hard to believe that Kelvin Gastelum will be able to get away from those situations. My concern for Hermansson is going to be his chin. Though Kelvin Gastelum does pack a punch, I think Hermansson should be okay. He should be fine in terms of evading all the big shots that Kelvin Gastelum is going to be throwing his way. But I'm interested to know how the grappling exchanges are actually going to play out. I think Hermansson will have the advantage, like I said, against strength. He has a great wrestling background as well, too. Has some sneaky trips. And then just being as long and awkward as he is, I believe that he'll be able to secure some takedowns. I think he'll be able to keep Gastelum down, but Gastelum has a pretty good get-up game. But we see as the fight plays on, he starts to wear down a little bit. That's Gastelum. If you guys remember his fight with Chris Weidman, that was his first fight against like a legit middleweight who was actually like able to, pretty much offer up something in return. Tim Kennedy was way past his prime when he fought him. Vitor Belfort, obviously, that was post TRT tour. So, Gastelum was able to get in there and get a knockout pretty quickly. But then the Chris Weidman fight, he had success early with the striking, but then after that, the size and strength of Chris Weidman really start to wear on him. And I think that's what we might see here with Jack Hermansson, who, in my opinion, will be the stronger grappler, even a stronger grappler than Chris Weidman and what he had to offer up in that point in time. And I think that Jack is going to be very, very, motivated to come in here and make up for that loss that he had against Jared Cannonier, because that really kind of fizzled out the flame that he was, that fire streak that he was on leading into that Jared Cannonier fight. I think Hermansson will do a decent enough job of keeping Kelvin Gastelum on the outside when he needs to, but when it comes to closing the distance and getting the takedowns, I think, again, his strength and length and size and all that will play a huge factor in this fight. I'm staying away from it, though, from a betting perspective, but I'm not batting an eye at anybody that's taking a shot on Jack Hermansson at that even money. Kelvin Gastelum is just able to pull out victories out of his ass every now and then, you know what I mean? Even fights that he shouldn't go out there and win, he wins them. But this, Hermansson just brings a different type of equation to this, a different problem that Kelvin Gastelum hasn't really faced in most recently, at least. Gastelum had that split decision victory over Jacare Souza in a fight where, Souza was really coming on late. Israel Adesanya, we obviously know how that fight went down. And then again, Darren Till just absolutely, putting on a striking clinic in terms of not taking damage, but still dishing out damage here and there. Jack Hermansson, again, I expect it to be a completely different fight than anything Gastelum has faced up until this point. And I like Hermansson. I'm going to take him to win this fight by decision. I don't think that there's a finishing, side here, other than Gastelum probably landing a big bomb. But I don't see that happening. I think it's going to be Hermansson pushing Gastelum up against the cage, slowly wearing him out, and then taking him down. And hopefully this is the last time we see Gastelum at middleweight. This guy's really he needs to get his shit together. He needs to, get on a proper eating plan or whatever the hell it is. I know he likes to smoke a ton of weed, but there's got to be a way of being able to smoke weed still, but eating healthy, delicious food that should help him with his training camps, with him getting his weight down, and then making that 170-pound limit, which is probably where he should be. Let's be honest. That's where he will have his most success. Not having to fight guys that are giants, Adesanya, Till, and Hermansson back to back to back. That's just a ridiculous row of guys, especially with their size and talent. And once again, it's going to show that, as talented as Kelvin Gastelum is, size does eventually start to play a part when the guy with the size advantage has just as good of a skill or skill set as Kelvin Gastelum. So I think that's going to show here with Jack Hermansson. So I think I will be taking Hermansson to win this fight by decision. I'll see how I feel about a bet, but I'm just trying to, bankroll management. I already have a couple bets out there. But I like Jack Hermansson to overpower and win this fight via decision against Kelvin Gastelum. Main event time, we got Deiveson Figueiredo versus Joseph Benavidez. We got minus 215 on Figueiredo, plus 195 on Joseph Benavidez. So if you guys remember, they already fought back in March or February. Unfortunately, Deiveson Figueiredo missed weight and he won the fight, but he doesn't get to go home with the strap. So they're running it back. Couple that in with the the unintentional headbutt that led to the finish of Joseph Benavidez. We just have a couple of circumstances that allow us to have this immediate rematch. Luckily for Joseph Benavidez, the UFC is more than on board with continuously trying to hand him a title, but he just keeps fucking it up somehow. Unfortunately, because I love Benavidez. He's a great guy. Been around the game for a while. That strap has always eluded him. He has 2 losses to Dominic Cruz, 2 losses to Demetrius Johnson, now potentially 2 losses to Deiveson Figueiredo coming up, and then obviously the only other 1 loss is to Sergio Pettis in a super close fight, especially a fight that had him coming back after an extended layoff, so that's something to keep in mind as well. So let's go back to that first fight. The only play I had on that first fight was the plus 140 on the under 4.5. I thought that either Figueiredo would get the finish early or Benavidez would get the finish late. Lo and behold, we got the early finish courtesy of Mr. Deiveson Figueiredo. This time around, the under 4.5 is lined at minus 165 all the way up to minus 190, and rightfully so. That first fight showed us a lot of things that would that really play a part into the under 4.5 being as kind of juiced as it is. Benavidez, decent fighter overall, but I think it comes down to the fact that he's a little bit wild when it comes to his striking exchanges. That's one thing I really picked up on when I studied that fight the first time, where I'm like, okay, the under is probably a good bet here, just due to how wild Benavidez is when he comes in for his striking exchanges. One thing that, the one combination I really pointed out that in that first breakdown was when he rips shots to the body. Like he kind of just wings them like this, and it just leaves his face open. And a guy like Figueiredo is just gonna land a bomb right down the middle. Obviously this time around it was due to a headbutt, and that led to the eventual finish by Figueiredo with a beautiful right hand that planted Benavidez on his butt. But we saw it leading up to the knockout too, though. Like when Benavidez throws his shots, he throws it in a winging motion. If you're throwing in a winging motion, all the other guy needs to do is just throw the punch straight, crisp down the middle. It's going to beat your punch, and you're the one going to be eating the harder end of that exchange. And that's exactly what we saw in numerous amounts of occasions in that fight. Just go back and watch that first round. There's so many times where Benavidez is just a millisecond slower on his punch because he's throwing it in a winging motion, whereas Figueiredo is just throwing it right down the middle, and Figueiredo is the one that's landing. So mix that in with his speed, his power, and his precision. Figueiredo is a very, very tough equation for a lot of guys to solve, especially within those first 3 rounds. We haven't seen him go the full 5 rounds yet, and I don't think we'll ever see that. Maybe we will, but I don't think that this is the fight that we'll see that. Which is why I think my lock of the night, I know and will be my lock of the night play is going to be the under 4.5. I'm happy to pay the juice on that, just because I still think that Deiveson is going to come out on the winning end once again. I think that he will land on Benavidez at will, pretty much like he did in that first round, or that first fight. And Benavidez, he can't just stay on the outside the entire fight. He's going to need to implement some sort of offense to start to at least score, to get the judges' scorecards if he wants to win rounds. But to do that, he's going to have to close the distance. And, we saw in the first fight, it's tough to get Figueiredo down. And even when he gets him down, it's tough to keep him there. I think Figueiredo for those first 3 rounds is just going to be a banshee. It's going to be tough for Benavidez to really score anything in those first 3 rounds. He's going to have to make Figueiredo work, whether it's just, chipping away at his legs from the outside, blitzing in with a couple shots. He can't blitz in with those body shots. And as effective as the body shots are, you can't be doing that against a guy like Figueiredo who's going to, counter super precisely, land on the chin, and probably put your lights out. I expect that to happen regardless. Adding to the fact that Benavidez seems to be a guy that's even more, he seems a little bit uncharacteristic this week. Like he wants to go out there and kill Figueiredo. Like he spiraled the fuck out of control after he lost that fight to Figueiredo, and now he's coming into this fight week saying, I want to kill the guy. I went through so much shit after getting knocked out, and all these feelings that I felt. I just want to go in. I hate the guy. I want to kill him. And we don't hear that from Benavidez often. That's very uncharacteristic of him. So that leads me to believe he's going to fight slightly emotionally. And luckily for underbettors, that opens up options for the finish to come on both sides, whether it's Benavidez landing a picture-perfect shot or it's Figueiredo countering precisely. I expect it to be the latter in this situation. The under 4.5 is definitely there. I'm intrigued to know how this fight would go if it gets past the 3rd round, because that's where I start to give Benavidez a little bit of an advantage. I think his speed and his winging, striking style won't be as much of a detriment in those later rounds as it would be in the first 3 rounds. That's where I think that he could absolutely overwhelm Figueiredo. Again, though, I don't think it even gets past the 2nd round. I truly believe that we'll see Figueiredo land a picture-perfect shot within those first 10 minutes to put Benavidez on his butt and get the finish that way. I love this fight for Figueiredo. I don't really want to play him straight, nor do I want to play him within the distance in case he doesn't get the finish himself, and then Benavidez starts to take over later in the fight and get the finish himself. But I like the under 4.5. I don't mind giving up those 2.5 minutes. Again, I try to just stick with straight plays or over unders since that's probably the majority of the bookies that offer those 2 lines. But I like the 4.5. Under 4.5. I truly think that Figueiredo is going to go out there and get the finish. Just more precise. He's quick, a ton of power. Just a very awkward fighter too, and he's long as well. So it's hard for Joseph Benavidez to really close the distance without eating a heavy shot in return. So I'm going to go with Figueiredo to win this fight by 2nd round TKO, but the lock of the night play will be the under 4.5. I'm probably going to take the shot at minus 190. I give it value up until about minus 220, minus 250, but I'm lucky to get minus 190 on Bookmaker. If you guys have other websites, I see it roughly around minus 165, minus 175. William Hill, Sportbet, 5 Dimes, those are the spots that you can get that. But there are other bookies that are offering the over under 2.5. I wouldn't feel as comfortable with that. I need those extra 2 rounds. So if unfortunately you're not able to get the 4.5, I apologize. But that's the bet that I feel most confident about on this entire card. Like, this is a really rough card where a lot of heavier favorites could go out there and lose. So, the only play I really feel confident about on this entire card is this under 4.5, because I expect Figueiredo to get the finish. And even if he doesn't, I expect Benavidez to have enough gas in the tank to drown Figueiredo in those later rounds. So I'll go with Figueiredo to win this fight by 2nd round KO, but the lock of the night play is going to be minus 190 on the under 4.5. Like I said, though, there's a ton of other places that you can get a better price. All right, that's UFC Fight Island 2. Decent card. Glad they got the title fight up top. But next weekend is going to be UFC Fight Island 3, headlined by Robert Whittaker against Darren Till. We got Shogun versus Lil Nog 3. We got Gustafsson making his heavyweight debut and coming out of retirement to fight Fabricio Verdum. And my boy Movsar Evloev is fighting as well, too. I believe he's fighting Mike Grundy. Am I going to make another play on him just as I have pretty much every single fight that he's been in the UFC? Maybe. Who knows? The quickest way for you to find out, though, is to hit up the Patreon, like I said at the top of the show. As soon as I finish recording my breakdowns, I post it right to the Patreon, so you guys have first access. $5 a month, super cheap. You get a ton of other content as well, too. You get all my picks a part of that subscription when I do charge the public. Speaking of which, I'm on a two event winning streak right now. If this one cashes as well too and we end up in the green, the fourth event is going to be paid for the public. But luckily, again, if you are a Patreon subscriber, you get those picks along with the subscription cost anyway, so you don't have to worry about that. And then lastly, you guys get a best bets article for every event too, which is pretty much laying out what the best bet for every single fight is. Not saying that I bet those personally, but if you are forcing me to bet every single fight on the card, I would tell you what my, if you put a gun to my head, what I would bet on and what probably has the most value in that fight as well too. So a ton of stuff on the Patreon. Make sure you guys check that stuff out. All right. I'm going to shut my mouth now so you guys can go on and, hop onto another predictions video or whatever the fuck. But I appreciate you guys checking out the video. And lastly, hit the subscribe button. I'm trying to hit that 1,000 mark before the end of the summer. We're at 930-ish right now. I'm getting close and close and close. It's so fucking close. I can just taste it. So the least you guys can do for me, if I'm helping you guys making money, or if you guys are watching my video on a weekly basis, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. That's the most I can ask of you guys, and I'd be very appreciative of it if you guys did that. All right, I'll shut the hell up now. I'll see you guys next week. Good luck on your bets this weekend, and yeah, gamble responsibly.